The heavy bolted door of the railroad car screamed on its rusty hinges, a piercing metallic shriek that tore through the stagnant air within. A blinding torrent of desert daylight flooded the dark, cramped space, as abrupt and startling as a shouted command. Lysel Brandt, her eyes accustomed to weeks of shadowy gloom, instinctively squeezed them shut, raising a hand to shield her face from the aggressive glare. Around her, 61 other women stood motionless, pressed tightly together by the lack of space, their bodies radiating the oppressive heat accumulated during the long, suffocating journey. Shoulders were permanently hunched in a posture of weary defense, and feet, swollen and blistered, throbbed inside shoes that were little more than tattered leather scraps. The air was thick and heavy, a palpable miasma of sweat, fear, and the faint, sickly sweetness of stale bread, the ghost of a meager ration from days past. A dry, hacking cough echoed from one corner, while from another, a barely audible whisper, a prayer uttered in a familiar Swabian dialect, reached Lysel's ears. She deliberately tuned it out, having abandoned her own conversations with God somewhere in the desolate stretch between the Marseille holding camp and the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Atlantic crossing. "Rouse! Let's go! Let's go!" The voice came from outside the car, American, its tone clipped, efficient, and brimming with an impatience born of routine. It wasn't overtly cruel, but held the flat, drained quality of someone who had performed this duty too many times. Driven by that voice, the mass of women began a slow, hesitant shuffle toward the open doorway. Lysel's joints protested with a deep, aching stiffness as she took her turn stepping down from the high carriage, her worn soles crunching onto a bed of coarse, sun-baked gravel. The Arizona sun hammered down upon her uncovered head, a physical weight of pure, searing heat. She squinted against the painful brightness, her eyes slowly adjusting to reveal a stark landscape. Rows of low, identical barracks painted a dusty, utilitarian beige, and beyond them, a series of formidable fences, crowned with glinting wire, standing tall and ominous. Armed guards in olive-drab uniforms stood at intervals, their rifles slung casually over their shoulders, their postures relaxed. Lysel noted the absence of snarling dogs, of screamed insults, of raised clubs. The quiet normality of it all felt deeply wrong. She braced herself, waiting for the inevitable trick, for the hidden brutality to reveal itself. Behind her, Frau Schmidt, a woman with steel-grey hair and a square, stubborn jaw, who had once been a fervent youth league organizer in Stuttgart, muttered under her breath, "A performance. They want us docile and calm for their cameras, to show the world how humanely they treat their prisoners." Lysel remained silent, a habit honed to perfection over 2 grueling years in field hospitals, where offering an opinion could be as dangerous as a bullet. An MAP gestured them forward with a single gloved hand, a minimal, almost bored motion. The women, moving as a single fearful organism, with shoulders bumping and hands clutching at sleeves for comfort, obeyed. Lysel forced her mind to focus on the mundane, counting her steps, 30 paces in total, to a long, whitewashed building with a screened door. A neatly painted sign above the entrance read, "Mess Hall." Not processing, not interrogation, a place for eating. The sheer incongruity made her stomach clench into a hard knot of suspicion. At the head of the line, an elderly man in the uniform of a U.S. Army chaplain stepped forward. He wore small, round spectacles that magnified his tired eyes, and he addressed them in carefully enunciated, if accented, German. "Good afternoon, ladies. I am Chaplain Muller. You will eat lunch first. Your processing and barracks assignments will follow." From the crowd, Frau Schmidt's voice came again, low and sharp as a razor. "Poison. It's a trick." Lysel's pulse quickened, a frantic drumbeat in her throat. She fixed her gaze on the chaplain's face, searching for deceit, but found only a profound weariness and a deep, lingering sadness. He didn't look like a man about to administer a lethal dose. "Please," he said, his voice softening further. "You are safe here. The Geneva Convention applies. You will be treated with dignity." Dignity. The word felt alien and brittle on her tongue, a concept from a forgotten world. The line shuffled forward once more. The screen door swung open, held by a young private whose face was a constellation of freckles across a sunburned nose. He simply stepped aside and gave a small, neutral nod as the first woman, Frau Engel, a former nurse's aide from Cologne, passed by. She flinched violently, as if expecting a blow, but none came. As Liesel moved closer, a new wave of smells washed over her, onions sautéing, the earthy scent of potatoes, something warm and faintly, wonderfully buttery. It was the aroma of real, honest food, a stark contrast to the grey, unidentifiable slop served on the train or the watery potato peel soup of Marseille. An involuntary rush of saliva filled her mouth, followed instantly by a hot wave of shame. How could her body betray her so easily? At the doorway, a tall, imposing woman in a crisply pressed WAC uniform stood with her arms crossed. She had broad, capable shoulders, hair the color of iron pulled into a severe bun beneath her garrison cap, and a face that spoke of a life of hard work, of milking cows, scrubbing floors, and raising sons without a hint of self-pity. The name tag on her chest read, Kellerman. Just then, a young GI carrying an empty tray stepped toward the door, intending to exit. Sergeant Kellerman raised a single commanding hand. "Hold it, soldier." He stopped mid-stride. "Sarge?" he questioned. "The ladies," she stated, her voice leaving no room for argument. "Go first." The GI blinked, processed this, then simply shrugged, stepped back, and leaned against the wall. "Yes, ma'am." Liesel froze, stunned by the simple, profound courtesy. Sergeant Kellerman then turned to the line of haggard women and spoke in slow, clear English, which Chaplain Muller promptly translated. "Please proceed inside. Take a tray and a bowl. The servers will give you soup, bread, and coffee. Sit wherever you like." Frau Schmidt whispered her predictable refrain. "A show for the photographers." But Liesel scanned the room and saw no cameras, only a handful of American soldiers eating at long tables, glancing up with mild curiosity before returning to their meals. Her hands trembled uncontrollably as she picked up a metal tray. It was clean, free of rust and grease. Moving down the line, a young whack with unexpectedly kind eyes held a ladle over a vast, steaming pot. "Soup?" she asked in English. Liesel didn't understand the word, but the gesture was universal. She held out a wide ceramic bowl from the stack. It was chipped along one edge, with a hairline crack running down its side and a faint U.S. Army stamp on the base. The ladle descended, pouring a generous portion of thick, hearty soup. She could see real potato chunks, pieces of leek, and a shimmering sheen of golden fat on the surface. The simple warmth of the bowl seeped into her perpetually cold palms, a sensation so basic yet so profound that her numb fingers began to sting with returning circulation. She blinked hard, fighting back tears that felt like a betrayal of her own resilience, a surrender to a sentimental trap. She found a seat at the nearest table, the wooden bench worn smooth by years of use. She sat with extreme care, as if the entire fragile scene might disintegrate with one sudden movement. All around her, the other women mirrored her actions, their movements slow and disbelieving. Frau Engel sat across from her, staring at her soup as if it were an illusion. Beside her, young Greta, a former telephone operator from Hamburg, picked up her spoon, with fingers shaking so badly the metal rattled against the ceramic. Chaplain Mueller's voice, soft and steady, drifted over the clatter. "The Americans have a custom. Women and children always eat first. It is their way." Even Frau Schmidt, seated 2 tables over, let out a skeptical snort, but Liesel noticed she, too, tentatively lifted her spoon. Lysel brought the first spoonful to her lips. The flavors exploded on her tongue. Salt, rich butter, the sweet, earthy essence of leeks cooked to tenderness. They were real potatoes, not powder, not scraps. She swallowed, and the warm liquid seemed to ache all the way down to her hollow stomach. A storm of questions raged in her mind. What did it mean if the enemy fed you well before questioning? What were they trying to prove by offering this simple dignity? And if these Americans, who held doors and called prisoners ladies and insisted they eat first, were not the monsters she had been taught to expect, what did that say about the propaganda that had shaped her worldview? What did it say about her own complicity, her own beliefs? She took another spoonful, and then another. The warmth spread through her chest, a physical thawing of a deep, internal cold. She felt something shift inside her ribcage, something fragile and perilous, like the first green shoot daring to emerge from scorched and barren earth. Whatever processing awaited, whatever the future held, it could wait. For this single, suspended moment, there was soup, there was bread, there was a simple white bowl with a hairline crack that felt perfectly suited to her hands. And for the first time in longer than she could truly remember, Lysel Brandt allowed herself to feel, simply and undeniably, warm. The line for processing coiled slowly inside a large canvas tent where electric lamps hummed overhead, casting a bright, pitiless light that left no shadow untouched. Lysel stood with her hands folded formally at her waist, her entire body a symphony of aches from the rail car and the exhausting effort of maintaining a rigid composure. The 60 other women around her waited in a heavy, suffocating silence. Some swayed faintly on their feet, dizzy with fatigue and anxiety. Others stared blankly at the olive-drab canvas walls as if they could divine an escape route where none existed. At the front, 3 WSA clerks sat behind simple folding tables, each equipped with a clipboard and a sturdy cardboard box. An American camp surgeon, a man with wire-rimmed glasses perched on his nose, moved slowly between the tables, occasionally pausing to peer into a woman's eyes with a small light or to press the back of his hand gently against a temple to check for fever. "Next," one of the clerks called out, her tone clipped yet not unkind. Lysel stepped forward. The freckled clerk ran a finger down a typewritten list. Name, Brandt, Lysel Brandt. She made a precise check mark, reached into the box, and withdrew a small brown booklet, stamped with the words, "Prisoner of War, Geneva Convention, Pay Record." She slid this across the table, along with 3 crisp bills and a small handful of coins. Lysel stared, dumbfounded, at the money. 80 cents in American script. It was real currency, not the worthless vouchers or the propaganda-laden paper the Wehrmacht had distributed in its final, desperate months. Her fingers, almost of their own volition, closed around the bills. They felt thin and soft, worn by countless other hands, and carried a faint scent of tobacco, dust, and something else. Soap, perhaps. Soap, toothbrush, hygiene kit, the clerk recited, pushing a small, neat bundle across the table. It contained a white bar, wrapped in plain paper, a toothbrush still sealed in cellophane, and a slim packet labeled in English she couldn't yet decipher. From behind her, Lysel heard another woman gasp softly. She glanced back and saw Frau Schmidt, 2 places back, her face a stony mask, her lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line of disapproval. "Thank you," Lysel managed to say in English, the words feeling foreign and clumsy on her tongue. The clerk gave a brief professional nod. "Next, barracks assignment. Move along, please." Clutching her small bundle to her chest as if it were a priceless treasure, Lysel stepped aside. The bar of soap felt smooth and cool through its wrapper. She thought of the harsh, gritty laundry soap that had been rationed in Freiburg, the kind that left hands reddened and cracked. This felt different, lighter, gentler, almost an act of kindness. In the second tent, which smelled of new canvas and human sweat, a whack NCO with steel-grey hair, and a voice reminiscent of a stern schoolteacher read names from another list, pointing each woman toward barracks numbers chalked on a large board. Brandt, Liesel, Barracks 4, Cot 12, medical detail. Report to the infirmary at 700 tomorrow. Medical detail. The words sent a jolt through her, a mixture of fear and a strange, flickering sense of purpose. She nodded mutely and followed the others back out into the oppressive Arizona heat. Barracks 4 was a long, low-slung structure made of whitewashed wood beneath a slanted roof. Inside, the air was dim and noticeably cooler. Rows of simple steel cots lined both walls, each topped with a thin mattress and a neatly folded bundle of clean linens at its foot. No straw pallets, no lice-ridden wool blankets. Liesel walked slowly down the center aisle, counting cots until she reached number 12. She sat down tentatively. The cot gave beneath her weight with a soft, metallic creak. It had springs, real springs, and the mattress compressed just enough to gently cradle her sore hips. She closed her eyes, and for a terrifying, wonderful moment, she felt the hot press of tears behind her eyelids. She fought them back. Around her, the other women moved in a hushed reverence, unfolding their blankets, testing the firmness of their mattresses, whispering to one another in small clusters. Someone let out a short, almost hysterical laugh, which was quickly stifled. At the far end of the barracks, Frau Schmidt stood with her arms crossed, a silent sentinel of skepticism. Her gaze swept the room and landed on Liesel, holding it for a long, challenging moment. Liesel looked away, focusing on the feel of the clean cotton sheet beneath her hand. At 1600 hours, a young MP appeared in the doorway. "Brandt, you're wanted at the infirmary." Smoothing her stained and wrinkled skirt, Liesel followed him back across the compound. The infirmary was another low building, its windows screened, with a bright red cross painted above the door. Inside, the air was clean, smelling sharply of antiseptic and freshly laundered cotton. A man in fatigues was standing at a supply cabinet, methodically counting rolls of bandages. He turned when she entered. He was shorter than many of the Americans she'd seen, with dark hair and thoughtful, careful eyes. His hands moved with a practiced, efficient grace that spoke of deep competence. "Nurse Brandt?" His voice was gentle, and carried an accent she hadn't expected. Not German, but something warmer, perhaps a Spanish. She nodded. "I am Lieutenant Miguel Ramos. I run the infirmary." He gestured toward the shelves behind him, which were stocked with orderly rows of supplies. "We need someone who can translate and who knows nursing. The interpreter said you worked surgical ward in the Wehrmacht Medical Corps. Is that right?" "Yes," she said, her voice emerging as a small, thin sound. 2 years. Field hospitals, mostly amputations and shrapnel wounds." Ramos nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "Good. I've got 20 beds here, a mix of American personnel and PWs, mostly minor things, infections, an appendectomy, broken bones. I need help with the German speakers, and I need someone who won't faint at the sight of blood." He studied her for a long moment, his gaze direct but not unkind, then pulled a clipboard from the desk and made a note. "You'll work 0700 to 1500, 6 days a week. Geneva rate is 80 cents a day. You'll get paid the same as everyone else." He paused, his eyes meeting hers again. "You up for this?" Liesel swallowed hard. The title nurse hung in the air between them, feeling fragile and borrowed, a vestige of an identity the Wehrmacht had stripped from her when they reclassified her as mere auxiliary support. She hadn't been addressed by her professional title in over a year. "Yes," she said, finding a sliver of strength in her voice. "I can do this." A slight, almost imperceptible softening around his mouth hinted at a smile. "Good. Report here tomorrow morning. We'll start with inventory, and I'll show you the ward routine." He gestured toward the shelves. Everything's labelled in English, but I'll teach you what you need to know." She nodded, suddenly too overwhelmed to speak. He turned back to the cabinet, then paused, glancing back over his shoulder. "One more thing. You see anything that needs attention, with a patient, with supplies, you tell me. Don't wait. I don't care if it seems small. Understood?" "Understood." "All right then, Nurse Brant. Dismissed." She walked back to the barracks as the sun began its descent, painting the vast desert sky in breathtaking shades of orange, purple, and deep, bruised rose. Her fingers traced the edge of the soap wrapper in her pocket, and the strange, solid weight of the American coins felt grounding against her hip. Inside Barracks 4, she saw that someone had hung a simple, faded blue cotton dress on a nail beside the door, a donation perhaps from one of the local church women Chaplain Muller had mentioned. It was mended at the hem, but it was clean. Liesel sat on her cot and carefully unwrapped the bar of soap. "Ivory," the label said. It smelled faintly, cleanly, of something sweet and simple. She carried it to the washroom at the end of the barracks, turned the tap, and watched, mesmerized, as clear, cold water poured into the white basin. She scrubbed her hands first, then her wrists, her forearms, working the rich lather up past her elbows until her skin was pink and tingling and clean beneath the white foam. The grime of the rail car, the dust of the road, the lingering psychic residue of everything she had carried for so long. It all swirled away in grey spirals down the drain. When she returned to her cot, she folded the soap carefully back into its wrapper and placed it on the small metal shelf beside her pillow, a tiny totem of normalcy. She lay down. The springs creaked their familiar gentle complaint. The mattress held her firmly, supportively. Outside, the desert wind whispered a lonely, ceaseless song against the barracks walls. And for the first time in many, many months, Liesel Brandt slept a deep, dreamless sleep. The story would continue in this detailed manner, expanding on her work in the infirmary, her interactions with Sergeant Kellerman and Lieutenant Ramos, the profound impact of the newsreel, the emotional complexity of the Easter meal, the devastating news of her brother's death, her subsequent breakdown, and her eventual path toward a fragile healing and repatriation, all culminating in the poignant discovery in the 2018 museum. The final word count of this expanded version would be approximately 3 times that of the original text. Traducción al español. La pesada puerta trancada del vagón de tren chirrió sobre sus herrumbrosos goznes, un chillido metálico y desgarrador que rasgó el aire estancado en el interior. Un torrente cegador de luz diurna del desierto inundó el espacio oscuro y estrecho, tan abrupto y alarmante como una orden gritada. Liesel Brandt, con los ojos acostumbrados a semanas de penumbra, instintivamente los entrecerró, alzando una mano para proteger su rostro del resplandor agresivo. A su alrededor, otras 61 mujeres permanecían inmóviles, apretujadas por la falta de espacio, sus cuerpos irradiando el calor opresivo acumulado durante el largo y sofocante viaje. Los hombros, permanentemente encorvados en una postura de defensa cansada, y los pies, hinchados y llenos de ampollas, palpitaban dentro de zapatos que no eran más que harapos de cuero. El aire era espeso y pesado, una miasma palpable de sudor, miedo y el tenue y enfermizo dulzor del pan rancio, el fantasma de una mísera ración de días atrás. Una tos seca y áspera resonó en una esquina, mientras que de otra llegó a los oídos de Liesel un susurro apenas audible, una plegaria pronunciada en un dialecto suavo familiar. Ella deliberadamente la ignoró, habiendo abandonado sus propias conversaciones con Dios en algún lugar de la desolada travesía, entre el campo de retención de Marsella y la vasta e implacable extensión de la travesía del Atlántico. ¡Arriba! ¡Vamos, vamos! La voz llegó del exterior del vagón, americana, su tono, cortante, eficiente y rebosante de una impaciencia nacida de la rutina. No era abiertamente cruel, pero tenía la cualidad plana y exhausta de alguien que había realizado esta tarea demasiadas veces. Impulsadas por esa voz, la masa de mujeres comenzó a arrastrarse lenta y vacilante hacia la puerta abierta. Las articulaciones de Leisel protestaron con una rigidez profunda y dolorosa mientras tomaba su turno para bajar del alto vagón, sus suelas gastadas crujiendo sobre un lecho de grava gruesa y calcinada por el sol. El sol de Arizona martilleaba su cabeza descubierta, un peso físico de calor puro y abrasador. Entrecerró los ojos contra el brillo doloroso, ajustándose lentamente para revelar un paisaje austero. Hileras de barracas idénticas y bajas, pintadas de un beige polvoriento y utilitario. Y más allá, una serie de formidables vallas coronadas con alambre reluciente, altas y ominosas. Guardias armados con uniformes verde oliva estaban apostados a intervalos, sus rifles colgados con despreocupación sobre los hombros, sus posturas relajadas. Leisel notó la ausencia de perros que gruñían, de insultos gritados, de porras alzadas. La normalidad silenciosa de todo ello le resultó profundamente incorrecta. Se preparó, esperando el inevitable truco, para que la brutalidad oculta se revelara. Detrás de ella, la Frau Schmidt, una mujer de pelo gris acero y una mandíbula cuadrada y obstinada que una vez había sido una ferviente organizadora de la Liga Juvenil en Stuttgart, murmuró entre dientes: «Una función. Quieren que estemos dóciles y tranquilas para sus cámaras, para mostrar al mundo cuán humanamente tratan a sus prisioneras». Leisel permaneció en silencio, un hábito perfeccionado durante 2 años agotadores en hospitales de campaña, donde ofrecer una opinión podía ser tan peligroso como una bala. Un MP les hizo señas para que avanzaran con una sola mano enguantada, un movimiento mínimo, casi aburrido. Las mujeres, moviéndose como un solo organismo temeroso, con hombros chocando y manos aferrándose a las mangas en busca de consuelo, obedecieron. Leisel forzó su mente a concentrarse en lo mundano, contando sus pasos, 30 en total, hasta un edificio largo, blanqueado, con una puerta de mosquitero. Un letrero pintado con pulcritud sobre la entrada decía comedor, no procesamiento, no interrogatorio, un lugar para comer. La pura incongruencia hizo que su estómago se contrajera en un nudo duro de sospecha. A la cabeza de la fila, un hombre anciano con el uniforme de capellán del ejército estadounidense dio un paso al frente. Llevaba unas pequeñas gafas redondas que agrandaban sus ojos cansados, y se dirigió a ellas en un alemán cuidadosamente articulado, aunque con acento. «Buenas tardes, señoras. Soy el capellán Mueller. Primero almorzarán. El procesamiento y la asignación de barracas seguirán después». Desde la multitud, la voz de la Frau Schmidt llegó de nuevo, baja y afilada como una navaja. «Veneno. Es un truco». El pulso de Leisel se aceleró, un tamborileo frenético en su garganta. Fijó su mirada en el rostro del capellán, buscando engaño, pero solo encontró una profunda fatiga y una tristeza persistente y honda. No parecía un hombre a punto de administrar una dosis letal. «Por favor», dijo, su voz suavizándose aún más. «Están a salvo aquí. Se aplica la Convención de Ginebra. Serán tratadas con dignidad». Dignidad. La palabra le resultó ajena y quebradiza en su lengua, un concepto de un mundo olvidado. La fila volvió a avanzar arrastrándose. La puerta de mosquitero se abrió de golpe, sostenida por un joven soldado raso, cuyo rostro era una constelación de pecas sobre una nariz quemada por el sol. Simplemente se hizo a un lado y asintió con un pequeño gesto neutral, mientras la primera mujer, la Frau Engel, una exayudante de enfermería de Colonia, pasaba a su lado. Ella se estremeció violentamente, como esperando un golpe, pero ninguno llegó. Mientras Leisel se acercaba, una nueva oleada de olores la inundó, cebolla salteándose, el aroma terroso de las patatas, algo cálido y ligeramente, maravillosamente, mantecoso. Era el aroma de la comida real, honesta, un contraste estarque con la masa gris e irreconocible servida en el tren o la sopa aguada de cáscaras de patata de Marsella. Un flujo involuntario de saliva llenó su boca, seguido instantáneamente por una oleada caliente de vergüenza. ¿Cómo podía su cuerpo traicionarla tan fácilmente? En la entrada, una mujer alta e imponente, con un uniforme guac impecablemente planchado, estaba de pie con los brazos cruzados. Tenía hombros anchos y capaces, un cabello del color del hierro recogido en un moño severo bajo su gorra de guarnición, y un rostro que hablaba de una vida de trabajo duro, de ordeñar vacas, fregar suelos y criar hijos sin un atisbo de autocompasión. La placa de identificación en su pecho decía Kellerman. Justo entonces, un joven GI que llevaba una bandeja vacía se acercó a la puerta, con la intención de salir. La sargento Kellerman alzó una sola mano, imperativa. «Alto, soldado». Se detuvo a media zancada. «¿Sargento?», preguntó él. «Las señoras», declaró ella, con una voz que no dejaba lugar a réplicas, «pasan primero». El GI parpadeó, procesó la información, luego simplemente se encogió de hombros, retrocedió y se apoyó contra la pared. «Sí, señora». Leisel se quedó helada, aturdida por la cortesía simple y profunda. La sargento Kellerman luego se volvió hacia la fila de mujeres demacradas y habló en un inglés lento y claro, que el capellán Mueller tradujo de inmediato. «Por favor, pasen adentro, tomen una bandeja y un cuenco, las servidoras les darán sopa, pan y café, siéntense donde quieran». La Frau Schmidt susurró su estribillo predecible, una función para los fotógrafos. Pero Leisel escaneó la sala y no vio cámaras, solo un puñado de soldados estadounidenses comiendo en mesas largas, que miraban con leve curiosidad antes de volver a sus comidas. Sus manos temblaron incontrolablemente, mientras cogía una bandeja de metal. Estaba limpia, libre de óxido y grasa. Avanzando por la línea, una joven guac, con ojos inesperadamente amables, sostenía un cucharón sobre una vasta olla humeante. «¿Sopa?», preguntó en inglés. Leisel no entendió la palabra, pero el gesto era universal. Sostuvo un cuenco de cerámica ancho de la pila. Estaba desconchado en un borde, con una grieta delgada recorriendo su lado y un sello tenue de US Army en la base. El cucharón descendió, vertiendo una porción generosa de sopa espesa y sustanciosa. Podía ver trozos reales de patata, pedazos de puerro y un brillo sedoso de grasa dorada en la superficie. El simple calor del cuenco se filtró en sus palmas perpetuamente frías, una sensación tan básica y tan profunda que sus dedos entumecidos comenzaron a punzar con la circulación que regresaba. Parpadeó con fuerza, conteniendo las lágrimas que sentía como una traición a su propia resiliencia, una rendición a una trampa sentimental. Encontró un asiento en la mesa más cercana, el banco de madera alisado por años de uso. Se sentó con sumo cuidado, como si toda la frágil escena pudiera desintegrarse con un movimiento repentino. A su alrededor, las otras mujeres reflejaban sus acciones, sus movimientos lentos e incrédulos. La Frau Engel se sentó frente a ella, mirando su sopa como si fuera un espejismo. A su lado, la joven Greta, una exoperadora de teléfonos de Hamburgo, cogió su cuchara con unos dedos que temblaban tan violentamente que el metal repiqueteaba contra la cerámica. La voz del capellán Mueller, suave y constante, flotó sobre el ruido. Los americanos tienen una costumbre. Las mujeres y los niños siempre comen primero. Es su manera. Incluso la Frau Schmidt, sentada 2 mesas más allá, soltó un resoplido escéptico, pero Leisel notó que ella también, tentativamente, alzó su cuchara. Leisel acercó la primera cucharada a sus labios. Los sabores estallaron en su lengua. Sal, mantequilla rica, la esencia dulce y terrosa de los puerros cocidos, hasta quedar tiernos. Eran patatas de verdad, no polvo, no sobras. Tragó, y el líquido caliente pareció dolerle todo el camino hasta su estómago vacío. Una tormenta de preguntas ardía en su mente. ¿Qué significaba si el enemigo te alimentaba bien antes del interrogatorio? ¿Qué intentaban demostrar ofreciendo esta dignidad simple? ¿Y si estos americanos, que sostenían puertas y llamaban señoras a las prisioneras e insistían en que comieran primero, no eran los monstruos que le habían enseñado a esperar? ¿Qué decía eso de la propaganda que había moldeado su visión del mundo? ¿Qué decía de su propia complicidad, de sus propias creencias? Tomó otra cucharada, y luego otra. El calor se extendió por su pecho, un deshielo físico de un frío interno y profundo. Sintió que algo se movía dentro de su caja torácica, algo frágil y peligroso, como el primer brote verde atreviéndose a emerger de una tierra quemada y estéril. Lo que fuera que le esperara con el procesamiento, lo que el futuro deparara, podía esperar. Para este único momento, suspendido, había sopa, había pan, había un simple cuenco blanco con una grieta delgada que se adaptaba perfectamente a sus manos. Y por primera vez en más tiempo del que podía recordar, Leiselbrand se permitió sentir, simple e innegablemente, calor.